Jack Benny once joked about having a fortified underground vault filled with alarms, traps, and a guard who had been down there since the Civil War. On radio it was all fantasy. In life he kept a real vault locked for 50 years after his death, filled with recordings labeled "Do Not Open." When researchers finally played them, they didn't hear scandal so much as a man reflecting on the choices and accidents that shaped him, the moments that could have destroyed his career, and the ones that made it legendary. He began life as Benjamin Kubelski, born February 14, 1894. His mother, Emma, was certain he would become a world-class violinist. She even traveled from Waukegan to Chicago just to give birth, convinced that a big city birth certificate would help his musical future. Frail but determined, she placed a violin in her son's hands almost as soon as he could hold one, while his father Meyer worked long hours in a saloon and later a haberdashery. Benjamin practiced reluctantly, gazing out their front window at Lake Michigan instead of at his sheet music. He studied under respected teachers, performed in recitals, and was treated as a prodigy. A group of Waukegan residents even raised money to send him to Europe for training, but he shocked everyone by refusing. School never held his interest either. He pulled pranks, skipped classes, and was eventually expelled. By then, he had found a different kind of education in his father's saloon, which was filled with traveling performers. Their timing, their stories, and their humor left a greater impression on him than violin scales. At 17, he dropped out of school entirely and joined a vaudeville act with a widowed singer named Cora Salisbury. They traveled endlessly, performing multiple shows a day. In 1912, he changed his stage name to Ben K. Benny after a famous violinist threatened to sue him for having a similar name. He later had to change it again when another performer complained, and finally settled on Jack Benny. He and his partner Lyman Woods built a solid career, but their big break at the Palace Theater in New York in 1917 ended in disaster when they followed an animal act and bombed. The partnership fell apart soon after, and Jack enlisted in the Navy during World War I. During a talent show at Great Lakes Naval Training Center, he played a violin piece that earned boos, and a fellow sailor shouted for him to tell a joke. Jack delivered a single line that brought the house down. That moment shifted his future. Jokes, not music, were going to be his life. After the war, he performed a mix of violin and humor in vaudeville. He sharpened his timing, honed his dry delivery, and developed a character who pretended to be cheap and self-important. Audiences recognized themselves in him, especially during the hard years after the war. He kept rising, refining the act until Broadway invited him in 1924. There he played the violin slightly off-key on purpose, blending sophistication and silliness in a way New York audiences hadn't seen. In 1926 he signed on to The Great Temptations, where he began ad-libbing so much that producers begged him to stick to the script. He ignored them. That same year he reunited with a girl he had briefly met years before, Sadie Marks, now 20 and working in a department store. Their courtship was awkward and slow but genuine. They married in 1927, and she would eventually join him on radio under her stage name, Mary Livingstone. He sent her one red rose every day of their marriage, a ritual that continued until his death nearly half a century later. Jack's rise was almost derailed when a theater manager accused him of mistreating musicians, sparking a union dispute that damaged his reputation and cemented the public impression of him as tight-fisted. But he kept moving, pushing into radio in the early 1930s as vaudeville faded. His early shows mixed serious violin playing with jokes, and audiences were lukewarm until he abandoned the idea of impressing anyone and leaned fully into self-mockery. His radio persona crystallized. Always 39 years old, always penny-pinching, and always just a little exasperated with everyone around him. The fictional vault debuted in 1935, and became one of the most beloved running gags in radio history. Jack surrounded himself with a cast that included Don Wilson, Phil Harris, and Eddie Anderson as Rochester, who became the first black performer with a regular role on national radio. Jack refused to appear if stations tried to cut Rochester's scenes, and their on-air banter made Anderson one of the highest-paid black entertainers of the era. Despite success, Jack's real life held missteps. His early film work in the late 1920s was stiff and awkward, leading MGM to drop him. Another film in 1945, The Horn Blows at Midnight, flopped so badly that it became a running joke for the rest of his life. In 1937, He and George Burns were caught in a scandal involving a con man posing as a diplomat who smuggled jewelry through customs. Jack narrowly avoided prison, paid a heavy fine, and turned the entire ordeal into comedy on radio, which the public embraced. During World War II, he became one of the most dedicated performers for the troops, traveling thousands of miles with the USO and donating a portion of his earnings to war bonds. When he brought the vault to those shows, servicemen roared with laughter at a joke they had already memorized. Television arrived in 1950, and Jack approached it nervously at age 56, unsure how his understated style would translate to the screen. Translated perfectly. His show became a national hit, and he used its success to showcase younger comedians, including a young Johnny Carson, who would later credit Jack as one of his greatest influences. Through the 1960s, Jack continued refining the vault sketches, turning them into satire about security and Cold War anxieties. Off-camera, he was far different from the miserly persona he played. His will revealed a multimillion-dollar fortune and a lifetime of anonymous giving. He funded music programs, created small trust funds for children born in his hometown, donated to orchestras, supported civil rights causes quietly, and made sure Eddie Anderson and his family prospered long after their show ended. He continued performing into his 70s until illness stopped him. In late 1974, doctors discovered he had pancreatic cancer. He kept working until almost the very end, surrounded in his final days by friends like George Burns, Frank Sinatra, Bob Hope, and Johnny Carson. Jack Benny died on December 26, 1974, at 80 years old. His influence on comedy was profound. Modern shows built around understated humor, awkward pauses, running gags, and characters who play versions of themselves all draw from him. Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David, and Gary Shandling followed structures Jack had designed decades earlier. Today, as old radio scripts are digitized and lost episodes surface, the vault opens again for new audiences. Even now, his timing holds, his jokes land, and the man behind the myth becomes clearer. A gifted comedian, a quiet philanthropist, a pioneer of modern entertainment, and someone who understood that sometimes the smallest joke, delivered with perfect timing, can last longer than anything locked in a vault.